and Shakespeare is going to play all kind of bawdy jokes with Bottom, because of course later in the play, Bottom is going to be turned into the head of a donkey, an ass. And of course, yes, in Shakespeare's day, bottom and ass both meant the same thing, and so ha ha ha, you can kind of see where this is going. They decide that the play they're going to perform for the king and queen's nuptials, the night of the wedding, will be the play Pyramus Thisbe. However, these guys are complete and total losers in every sense of the word. They are not actors, and so their performance of Pyramus and Thisbe is going to be just, well, let's just say it out loud, awful. Okay, it's going to be awful. However, they're going to go to the woods and they're going to practice that evening. Okay? Group number 4. Now this one is a strange group, and often when students read this for the first time, they're kind of blown away by it. They're like, are we supposed to be taking this seriously? Well, Shakespeare asks us to use our imagination. The 4th group is a group of, we might call them fairies, or spirits. Gods and goddesses, maybe a bit of a stretch, but for sure we've got Oberon, who is the leader of this fairy group, and we've got Titania, his wife. And they are having a fight. Okay? They are a married couple who are having a fight. Why? Well, Titania's got this little boy that she has in her charge, and Oberon would like this little boy in his charge. And so he says to her, I'm your husband, I am the man, you do what I tell you, give me the boy. And she says, yeah, no. No, I got no interest in it at all. By the way, let's just point out the radical nature of this poem, play, where you will have often women telling men, yeah, no, you cannot control me. I don't care who you are. I don't care whether you're my father. I don't care whether you're some lover that thinks you've got my dad on your side. This is, of course, Hermia to Demetrius. I don't care. I'm doing what I want. And Titania says the same thing to Oberon. Enter the great character, maybe one of the greatest characters Shakespeare ever invented. Oberon will have a young Robin Goodfellow. Puck is his traditional name, and this is the troublemaker of the play. Okay, let's just leave him at that. He's the troublemaker of the play. He's also the source of a lot of comedy in the play because he cannot help himself from screwing it up. Okay, and if you know any plays at all, to jump, or movies or whatever, to jump to 3A quickly, if you know any kind of performances of any type where you've got some kind of guy that's always getting everything screwed up and in trouble, that kind of troublemaker, but you gotta love him kind of character, it all kind of in many ways comes back to this famous creation of Shakespeare's, Puck. All right? So Oberon says to Puck, I got this special dope. It's wonderful dope. Because here's what it does. When you put it on the eyes of someone, the moment they open their eyes after sleeping, whoever they see, they fall in love with, and they cannot help themselves. Very much like Dido, who will be forced to fall in love with Aeneas in the Aeneid, because Aeneas' mother, Aphrodite, Venus in the Roman text, has a son named Cupid, and he makes it impossible to not fall in love. Remember, we're playing before the age when we understand things called testosterone and hormones and all of that, okay? So in other words, I got this dope, and this is exactly what he says. I want you to play around with this dope, and I want you to put it on the eyes of Titania, my wife, and I want her to fall in love with some kind of crazy something or another, right? In other words, I want to humiliate her. This is basically the plot line. In the meantime, Oberon discovers that he sees Helena and Demetrius in the woods together, and Demetrius is treating Helena really badly. And he says, why don't you put the dope on the young Athenian's eyes? And of course, that's Demetrius for Oberon. In the meantime, Puck screws it all up. Let's go now to the end of the play. And at the end of this section of the play, in the woods. By the way, let's point out for our notes. In the city, civilization, rules, politics. In the woods, the world of nature. We make our own rules, and of course, this is the world of the fairies and the dope that Puck has. This special love potion dope, okay? The Aphrodisiac. For those of you that want to know this term, Aphrodisiac, that is to say, dope that makes two people have real strong sexual feelings. Aphrodisiac comes from our word Aphrodite, of course. It's dope that makes people want to fall in love. Well, Puck screws it up. And ultimately the way he screws it up is by putting the dope on both men's eyes, Lysander and Demetrius. Right? But he starts with putting it on Lysander's eyes, and when Lysander opens his eyes, he does not see his Hermia because they've decided to sleep but sleep separately. By the way, not because that's what Lysander wants. When they decide to sleep in the woods that night, Lysander says to Hermia, let's go to sleep. And Hermia says, great idea. I'm going to sleep here. You're going to sleep way over there. He's like, what are you talking about? We're in the woods. Come on. She's like, no, no, no. We're not married yet. I'm a smart enough girl, and my dad taught me well. I would never mess around with a guy until I've got that ring on my finger. In other words, I ain't going to give him what he wants so he can bolt. So she says, you sleep over there. I'm sleeping here. Well, that puts them obviously separated. And Puck doesn't know what he's doing. He puts the juice on the eyes of Lysander. When Lysander opens his eyes, the first thing he sees is not Hermia, it's Helena. Right? And when he sees Helena, he can't help it. He's just totally mad in love. She's like, what are you talking about? You're in love with my best friend. Hermia, you can't be in love with me. He's like, no, forget about Hermia. I never want to talk to Hermia again. I will never speak to Hermia again. Of course, we laugh about this, but then we saw this happen in Romeo and Juliet, where Romeo's ready to kill himself over Rosaline, and then he goes to a party and he sees Juliet, and when the Friar Lawrence asks him the next morning about getting married, he's like, oh, so you worked it out with Rosaline. What? Rosaline? No, I got no interest. He's like, are you serious with me? Of course here, this is comedy, right? It's funny. Meanwhile, Puck, because he's realized he's screwed up, will also put the dope on the eyes of Demetrius. When Demetrius wakes up, he immediately sees Helena as well. And now both guys are interested in the one girl that nobody wanted at the beginning of the play. Of course, this ultimately will lead to a fight between the two girls. Because obviously Helena and Hermia have no idea that this dope's in play. And so we have this really interesting fight that goes on. In some performances, like the one we will study, which is the Kristen Bale performance, we even have a mud wrestling fit between two young ladies in the middle of the woods and all of that, you see. Okay, so we've got girls fighting against each other over guys. This doesn't happen anymore at Moreland High School. We're happy to report. Oh yeah, so see, this play obviously capturing any number of very modern kinds of situations still. Meanwhile, the actors are performing in the wood trying to practice, okay, and we've got guys trying to figure out what Pyramus Thisbe's even about. Bottom, it wanders off, and Oberon will have Puck play a game, as we've already said, and he will turn Oberon's head into the head of a donkey, an ass, okay? And the moment Titania opens her eyes, the first thing she sees is Bottom and his goofy head. And she falls in love with him. So obviously we've got all kinds of crazy going on in the woods. Okay? At the end of this evening, right, it's all been figured out so that all of the appropriate couples are back together. Okay? Titania's returned back to Oberon and she says, fine, you can have the boy. Lysander will be returned back to his Hermia, and of course, now all of a sudden Helena and Demetrius will decide this is going to be all okay, right? That's the morning, and when they all wake up, they're not sure what happened, but they know everything is resolved. They even comment that it's like they were all in a strange dream. Okay? A performance of this play, by the way, well done, will have a dream-like element to it. The beginning of the play is the end of the play. In other words, we begin with talking about weddings, we end with talking about weddings, and again, we go from some kind of problem to some kind of solution. However, we've got Daddy who's still fired up about the fact he wants his daughter, Hermia, to marry with Demetrius and not Lysander. However, now Demetrius will say, I got no interest in Hermia anymore, it's Helena that I want. And the dad's like, what are you talking about? And he says, I can't explain it, but I came out here into the woods because your daughter ran away to try and get married to Lysander. And immediately the father's like to Theseus, there it is. That's all you need. Kill Lysander and my daughter gets jacked. And Demetrius goes, no, wait. Somehow it all worked out though. I can't explain it, but now I've got no interest in your daughter. And even if you ask me to marry your daughter, I won't do it now because I'm very interested in her best friend, who is, of course, Helena. And it's interesting at this moment that Hippolyta, who has been a queen, who has only been a queen in name, she plays for the first time the role of arbitrator, and she basically seems to suggest to her husband, soon-to-be husband, the king, I think you better let this thing ride, because it's pretty clear these young people are all in love, okay? And in a good performance of this play, you kind of get this sense that Hippolyta decides, okay, if I've got to be married to Theseus, I guess I might as well just get along with it and enjoy and fall in love with him as well, blah, blah, blah. We then have the night of the wedding to end the play. However, Shakespeare's going to have a bit more fun with this whole notion of the course of true love never did run smooth. So he has the very tragic story told as a comedy, Pyramus Thisbe on stage. And of course, if you have fine actors, we will watch in our performance the great comedic actor Kevin Kline. If you have fine actors, then you've got true comedy. I mean, you're dying laughing about the Pyramus Thisbe story, which is fundamentally the last scenes of Romeo and Juliet, right? Their performance is really, really funny, and the play will end with everyone figuring it all out, and all, they're married, and now they're all going to bed, and on their way there, Puck himself will speak the final words of the play, and he will in fact say, it's not real clear how much of this actually happened versus just a dream, but in the end, it's all fine. Because that's what love is. It's a beautiful dream. That is to say, Midsummer Night's Dream. Now let's turn really quickly at level 2 and 3, and let's decipher a bit, if we can, of some of the major messages, and of course at 2B, some of the rhetorical elements as well. At 2A, well, we said it already. The course of true love never did run smooth. You can easily find 3 examples of the ways in which love ends well, but on its way there, it's going to go through all kinds of major, major problems, right? It doesn't always run smooth. And of course, in the storyline of Pyramus Thisbe, Romeo and Juliet, it doesn't run smooth at all because, of course, the lovers end up jacked, right? Also, notice, this play seems to suggest you can defy authority, especially if you're young, even if you're a woman, and you can get away with it. This play, obviously, very radical then for its day. Notice there's no suggestion of punishment for 2 young people taking the law into their own hands and going off and getting married, as we see in Romeo and Juliet. Notice in the comedic version of Pyramus Thisbe, it all works out. It's all okay, right? Of course, the youth versus old age, no question. The young get their way in this play, which obviously makes this the play of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And forever has been seen that way ever since, right? This is a very controversial play. Lots of authority figures, even today, they don't like this play. Sometimes this play, for example, is going to be performed in high schools, and there's certain older adults that don't like it. They don't see it. They see it as a play that licenses young people doing crazy and defying authority figures and saying, I don't care what you tell me to do, I'm going to do what I want to do. Of course, let's say it out loud, the power of love, and more particularly that notion that love is blind, right? That love is blind. The notion that you think you know what you're doing when you fall in love, but you got no idea. And of course, in the end, you never know if it's going to work out or not. That's what makes it so exciting, so fun, and of course so tragic. At level 2B, our symbolism, well, obviously Puck is a great symbol of the source of all confusion, right? And the dope that he will wield. Of course, the woods can symbolize the world of nature, where all kinds of crazy can happen. And the city will represent civilization, and the idea that they will get married, not in the woods, but in the city. In other words, you got to have those kind of social norms or rules. But there's always a tension between the two, we might say. The irony, we might say it to be, has everything to do with, of course, the fact that Bottom gets turned into an ass. And in the end, of course, it's all really kind of a funny game. The game that Oberon will play on Titania, right? At level 3A, we've mentioned the Aeneid, we've mentioned Plato and Symposium, obviously Pyramus Thisbe, and especially the telling of that in the classic Roman tradition of Ovid, that's the author, and his classic text, Metamorphoses. So that's an important text for us. We will make reference to that a number of times in our study together. Of course, let's just write it down. You can't help but look at Romeo and Juliet and the ways in which these 2 texts are kind of going to be companion reads for us. The same genius mind that wrote Romeo and Juliet also wrote Midsummer Night's Dream, and as well Sonnet 116, as I mentioned at the beginning. 3B, and finally, well, this is an interesting question. Think about this for yourself personally. Do you think love is the ultimate source of insanity? Do you think love is the ultimate source of joy? And can they be both? And to what degree is it a good thing when we talk about falling in love? And why is it that that's often referenced, falling in love? Okay. Finally, and sometimes I have students that say, I guess I haven't really thought about that. How do you feel about the father in this play, Jesus? He's the one kind of forgotten character in the play who doesn't get what he wants. He's got to live with the fact that now his daughter gets what she wants, and he kind of got beat by his daughter, and she got what she wants. How do you think the relationship goes forward in regards to daughter and father? By the way, put it in your notes at 3A. Shakespeare will also play around with the same kind of thing in the play Hamlet, when you have that interesting tension between Polonius, the father, and Ophelia, the daughter, who is in love with Hamlet, and has been warned by her father, as well as by her brother Laertes, you better stay away from Hamlet, he's bad news. And of course the tragedy of Hamlet is, Ophelia does end up jacked at the end of that play, right? Well, there you go, an introduction to Midsummer Night's Dream, the great play of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I hope you enjoy the study.